Here's a short practice to explore extended triangle pose, Utthita Trikonasana. It's a lovely expansive pose that can sometimes aggravate our lower back or our sacroiliac joints. So today's focus is really on how the leg bones are moving in the pelvis and getting better connection and coordination in the way the legs and the pelvis and the torso move together. So we're just going to start lying onto your back. You can have a blanket under your head or some pillow or whatever. You might have a bath towel if you need to. And stand your feet on the floor, knees up towards the sky. And just for a moment here, bring your hands to your mid-belly and just relax into your breath for a moment. Just notice where your feet meet the floor. Feel the back of your torso. Sensing into your shoulders, your arms, and the back of your head. Nice, soft, slow breathing. And then bring your hands to the front of your pelvis. And gently tilt your pelvis so that your tailbone moves towards the feet or towards the floor. And then the tailbone just lifts up gently. So we're doing a little pelvic tilting. Just getting a sense here of how your pelvis feels and how it's moving. You don't have to overwork or engage your abdominals a lot. Just nice, easy movement of the pelvis, rolling forward and back. And then let the pelvis come back into stillness, keeping the hands where they were. We're going to slowly take the knees and open them out towards the sides. Coming onto the outer edges of your feet. And then bringing the thighs back up to center. Now as you're doing this little motion of abduction of the legs, we just want to pay attention to whether the pelvis is tilting or tucking like it was initially when we were intending to have that movement happen. And what we're practicing here is moving the legs in a range where the pelvis stays really relaxed and quiet. So we're getting some movement through the thighs, moving in and out. And the pelvis is staying nice and easy on the ground. Feel into your breath. Slow, easy breathing. And then the next time that the knees come back to center, just pause a moment. And then take one knee into each hand, holding the tops of the knees here. And circle the knees out and away from each other, and then back together. And as you do that, as you move your knees in circles, you might feel that the back of your pelvis is actually tilting now, which is fine. So feel how the movement of the legs and the pelvis are happening together, and then you can switch directions. Nice and easy here. And then go ahead and release your feet back down to the floor. And then rolling over to one side, bringing yourself up into standing. If you have a yoga strap, you can take that. If you don't have a yoga strap, you could use a bathrobe tie or something that's long enough. If you have a yoga belt and you can make a loop in your belt, go ahead and make a loop, okay, and step into the loop. And then place it right around about midway around the thighs. If all you have is a bathrobe tie, that's fine. Just take the tie, bring it around your legs, and tie a knot in it so that it stays secure. And then we'll come into mountain pose, just standing. Relaxing into your feet. And just notice where you feel the weight in your feet. Can you sense the weight through the heels to the balls of the feet? Relax your shoulders. Now we're going to come into a little chair squat. So I'll turn to the side here. And the way that I'd like you to work with this chair squat today is we want to move in harmony between the hips, the knees, and the ankles. So as I sit back into the chair, my bum goes back, my knees go a little forward, and I'm also bending a bit at the ankles. What I will often see is there's not very much bend at the hip here, and it's mostly just the knees popping forward, which is a way to squat. It's just not the squat that I was kind of wanting to explore today. The other thing I might see is a big bend of the torso, which again is a way to squat. But today we want to work on the harmony here between the hips, the knees, and the ankles. So one cue that I really find helpful to work with this squat is to consider as you're starting the squat to squat so your legs are coming up towards your torso versus your torso moving towards your legs. So if you come into mountain pose and you squat, thinking about your legs coming up towards the torso, that often can give your upper body that awareness so we don't just bend forward from the torso. Now I have the belt around my thighs here so that as I come in and out of this squat, I can feel the outer hip muscles activating a little bit. So let's just do a couple more like that. You can put your hands even to your bum here, just to encourage this sitting back into the hips. But again, think about the legs coming up towards the torso. And then we're going to stay in this little chair squat for a moment. And just press your legs out into the belt. And notice what you feel there. I can feel some engagement through my outer hips a bit, through my legs. And then just relax that. And then again, press the legs out into the belt. And relax. Let's do one more. Legs press out. Just notice what you feel through your feet, your knees, your legs, your hips. Relax, and then come all the way back up to stand. Let's take the strap away. And standing in mountain pose, Tadasana. Notice where you feel the weight through your feet again, through the heels to the balls of the feet. And then we'll take a little wider stance, a little wider than shoulder width. Turn your legs out. Let your feet follow along in that turnout of the legs. So we're rotating the thighs into external rotation here. And then again, as we come into this wider goddess squat, think about your legs coming up towards your torso. So you can try that a couple of times. You can also bring your hands to the outsides of your middle thighs. And as you come into the squat, pressing your legs out into your hands a little bit. This is similar to when we had the belt around our thighs. And let's stay in this pose for a moment here, pressing your legs out into your hands. There's nice, easy breath and softness through the ribs, and the torso and shoulders relax here. Just feel some work through your legs, down through your feet. Straightening the legs, coming all the way back up, and step the feet back towards one another. Back into Tadasana, mountain pose. Now when we work with our peak pose today of triangle, we'll take a wider stance between your feet. If we go too wide, what will often happen is the pelvis will tilt into a different plane of motion. So if I start to take my feet quite wide, wider than I have the capacity for, I'll start to feel my bum kind of stick back a little. And that often happens because I've taken my legs too far and I don't have the capacity to be able to hold that without something changing in my pelvis. So I recommend exploring the stance between your feet. Notice when you go too far. Does your pelvis tilt or tuck? Okay, and then stay in a position where that doesn't happen, so that your pelvis is steadfast and grounded. And that's really the aim of our yoga practice, right? To feel more grounded and steady. Then from there, I'm going to start with this left leg and rotate the left leg in a little. Pelvis turns in slightly, and the right leg out. So now I've set my legs up for triangle pose. Now with triangle, the key here is to move from the pelvis. A lot of times what we'll do in triangle, a couple of things, we might reach out, which then kind of shifts the ribs forward of the pelvis to get that desired lengthening through this front side of the body, right? So then we can go into triangle that way. That is one way to go into triangle. I do find that oftentimes when I do that, I can feel something not so great in my lower back. The other thing that might happen is as we come into triangle, we just do a side bend, and there's really no movement through the hips, which again is another way to do triangle. There's no wrong way to do this. The way that I'd like to offer today is to move through your hips and let your torso and spine follow along. So one thing you can do here is put your hands on your pelvis and just start to kind of feel the pelvis tilt forward or side to side, not so much forward. Okay, so we're getting a little bit of movement here. Now this isn't a side bend, okay? It's a movement through the hips. And as you find, wherever you are able to move there, this is just the beginnings of getting that nice hip motion to move into triangle pose. Now, if you're not sure whether you're side bending, another little trick can be to bring your thumbs to the bottom of your rib cage and your pinky fingers right on your two front hip bones here, right in the front of the pelvis. And then as you move into triangle pose, these points here really ought not to get shorter on one side than the other. So in other words, if you're coming into triangle pose over your right leg, if you start to feel this right side get a little shorter, it just might mean that you did a side bend instead of a movement through your hips. So this triangle pose today is a great way to build connection between your pelvis and your torso. And then so wherever you land is great, wherever you land. You can bring your bottom hand to the leg, just a light touch, and you can take the other arm up. And you can see here my pelvis is tilted towards the front leg and my spine is long. And then slowly stand all the way back up. We'll turn the right leg in and step your feet back towards one another. And you might just take a moment to pause between sides to notice what you feel. And then determine the stance between your feet again. Notice if your pelvis wanted to tilt or tuck. Perhaps you went a little too long for this particular triangle pose. Once you find your stance, turn the right leg in, the pelvis turns in slightly, and the left leg rotates out. And again, we can start to kind of explore this movement of the pelvis tilting, torso following. Again, we're not shifting the ribs or kicking the pelvis out to the side. Just for this variation, you can also bring your thumbs to the low ribs, pinky fingers to the pelvis, coordinating the movement between the pelvis and the torso here. And when I find that I work in this refined way, so I'm coming into my triangle, here's about the availability I have today in this left side of my hip. When I find that I explore and refine my standing poses in this way, I feel much more free in my hips and my lower back. I feel more grounded through my feet, and there's just a lightness in my posture. And even here now, when you come out of the pose, we want to keep the connection, the equal length between both sides of the torso as you're coming up. Turning the left leg in, step your feet back towards one another. So that is a little practice for working with triangle pose. I hope it's helpful and brings you closer to that experience of having some freedom in your hips and your back and your whole body. Have fun practicing.